Politicians love talking about budget cuts, but have you seen how they spend taxpayer money? From million-dollar hotel stays to gold-plated showers, the numbers are insane. Some of these expenses will make you question everything about government spending. Let's get into it. If you thought hotel stays were expensive, wait until you see former American President Joe Biden's $1 million Europe trip, where just one night in Paris cost a mind-blowing $585,000. That wasn't even the full tab. His European trip racked up over $1 million, with another $459,000 spent on a London stay. A quick stopover, yet the expenses ballooned, covering an army of staff, security, and even military personnel. The numbers sound insane, but officials brushed it off, calling it normal for high-level travel. They argued that protecting top officials requires full hotel takeovers, fleets of security, and round-the-clock military support. That means entire floors booked, massive motorcades, and advanced teams flying in days before. Even Biden's limo? It wasn't just a ride, it was flown in separately. Meanwhile, taxpayers keep footing the bill. While millions struggle with rent, inflation, and taxes, politicians continue traveling like royalty, spending more on one night in a hotel than most Americans make in a decade. Speaking of absurd expenses, the French President Emmanuel Macron's first 3 months in office came with a $30,000 makeup bill, because apparently, flawless skin is a presidential necessity. That's right, the French president was spending taxpayer money to keep his face flawless. His personal makeup artist, known only as Natasha M., sent 2 invoices, one for $11,000 and another for over $19,000. And it wasn't the first time. She had also worked on Macron's campaign, making sure he always looked camera ready. When the spending was exposed, the Élysée Palace scrambled for an excuse, claiming it was an urgent expense and promising to cut costs in the future. His predecessor, Nicolas Sarkozy, wasn't shy about his looks either, reportedly spending $9,000 a month on hair and makeup. But that's nothing. He spent nearly $400,000 on a gold-plated shower, only to never even use it. This wasn't just any shower. It was a custom-built masterpiece, decked out with power jets, a massage system, and even surround sound radio. The setup was part of a massive upgrade to the Grand Palace in Paris for a 3-day EU Mediterranean summit. Hundreds of technicians worked around the clock, millions were spent, and yet, when the time came, Sarkozy decided he'd rather freshen up back at the Élysée Palace. That wasn't the only absurd expense. The event also saw nearly $1 million spent on a single dinner for world leaders, a $90,000 carpet, and a $250,000 podium. In total, France's EU presidency cost an eye-watering $280 million, making it one of the most expensive in history. To make things worse, a separate EU event was abruptly canceled because Sarkozy decided he wanted to sleep in his own bed instead. By then, journalists, officials, and delegates had already arrived, leading to a wave of complaints and compensation payments. While France struggled with economic issues, its presidents were living like a king, throwing money at unnecessary luxuries and leaving taxpayers to pick up the tab. Whereas Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau took wasteful spending to new heights, literally flying to a billionaire's private island for a holiday that cost taxpayers over $215,000. At first, officials claimed the cost was around $127,000, but new documents showed it was way higher. The RCMP alone racked up over $150,000 for security, travel, and overtime. And when asked where all that money went, silence. The details were classified under security concerns. This wasn't just a casual getaway. Trudeau and his entourage, including Liberal Party insiders, spent their Christmas holiday on Belle Island, owned by the Aga Khan, a billionaire whose foundation has received millions in Canadian government funding. That alone was enough to trigger an ethics investigation. Then came the flights. Trudeau took a government jet to Nassau, costing over $30,000. He then hopped on the Aga Khan's private helicopter, breaking Canada's strict rules against ministers accepting free flights. When caught, he reimbursed just $4,895, pocket change compared to the actual cost. While Western leaders waste public funds, the Supreme Leader of North Korea Kim Jong-un is busy smuggling luxury cars and Rolex watches into North Korea while his people starve. Kim Jong-un lives like a king while his people barely survive. His obsession with luxury is no secret. Rolex watches, Mercedes Maybach limousines, and even a Russian-made Oris gifted by Vladimir Putin. He's been spotted wearing a $12,000 IWC Schaffhausen watch, all while North Koreans struggle with food shortages. Meanwhile, China and Russia continue blocking any new UN sanctions against North Korea, making it easier for Kim to fuel his lavish lifestyle. While his people ration food, he parades around in cars worth millions. The hypocrisy? Beyond belief. Former U.S. President Obama's White House wasn't exactly thrifty either. His presidency racked up $1.4 billion in annual expenses, 25 times more than the British royal family. Just keeping Air Force One in the sky racked up $346 million, while vacations alone drained $20 million a year. Even lawn maintenance at the White House cost over $6 million annually. Obama's administration openly suggested that some Americans had too much in retirement savings, hinting at the idea of regulating personal wealth. Meanwhile, tax laws got so complicated that a simple tax form instruction booklet ballooned to over 200 pages, while companies like General Electric filed tax returns that would stretch 24,000 pages if printed. Then came the talk about ending special tax breaks for oil companies. Except those companies were already paying more taxes than tech giants like Apple and Microsoft combined. Yet somehow they were the bad guys. While everyday Americans were working months just to cover their tax bills, politicians were spending without limits. Tax Freedom Day, the day Americans technically stop working for the government and start earning for themselves, kept creeping further into the year. Former President of South Africa's Jacob Zuma went all in on corruption, dropping $24 million of public money to upgrade his mansion, with a swimming pool he laughably called a fire safety feature. South Africans weren't buying it. Parliament erupted with lawmakers chanting, "Pay back the money," as protests spread. With the country battling unemployment and economic struggles, the lavish spending symbolized everything wrong with the government. The corruption watchdog ruled that Zuma had unduly benefited and demanded repayment. At first, he denied responsibility, insisting he never ordered the upgrades. But when his own lawyer admitted he had no right to ignore the ruling, the excuses fell apart. Meanwhile, contractors and architects who worked on the mansion were accused of inflating costs, making the scandal even bigger. Courts got involved, political rivals pushed for his resignation, and his approval ratings tanked. Outside the courthouse, protesters flooded the streets chanting, "Zuma must fall." Even his own party, the ANC, started distancing itself from him. Speaking of the party, former Prime Minister of Italy, Silvio Berlusconi's political party turned public funds into their personal piggy bank, blowing $34 million on lavish parties, villas, and even a $26,000 toga party. Another, Franco Fiorito, managed to funnel nearly $800,000 into his personal lifestyle, buying 5 homes and vacationing in Sardinia on taxpayer money. The corruption ran so deep that even party leaders were pointing fingers at each other. Investigators uncovered a total financial disaster. Party funds had no oversight, no structure, just reckless spending. Officials were driving around in $90,000 BMWs, while regular Italians struggled to make ends meet. Even as scandals piled up, Berlusconi urged his allies to hold on to power, fearing an early election could end their grip on the government. Meanwhile, approval ratings for his party tanked, and voters made their anger known at the ballot box. But when it comes to sheer extravagance, few can top the former First Lady of the Philippines, Imelda Marcos, who hoarded over 3,000 designer shoes while her husband looted $10 billion from the Philippines. While millions of Filipinos lived in poverty, Imelda Marcos hoarded luxury, over 1,000 designer dresses, 888 handbags, 15 mink coats, and even a bulletproof bra. Her lavish lifestyle was funded by the $10 billion stolen by her husband, dictator Ferdinand Marcos. When protesters stormed Malacañang Palace in 1986, they found vaults of jewelry, cash, and rare gems, later known as the Marcos jewels. Despite the country drowning in debt, she flaunted her riches, even creating a museum for her infamous shoe collection. Even in exile, she showed no remorse, proving that in politics, wealth can outlive justice. And finally, Malaysia's 1MDB, One Malaysia Development Berhad scandal takes the crown. Former Malaysia's Prime Minister Najib Razak stole, no, he looted $4.5 billion from the 1MDB fund, using it for yachts, diamonds, and even the Wolf of Wall Street. His partner in crime, Joe Low, funneled the money through offshore accounts, partying with celebrities, and buying a $250 million yacht. When the scandal broke, Najib fired critics, but global investigations led to his conviction and a 12-year prison sentence. Authorities seized his wife's $270 million jewelry collection, yet Malaysia is still paying the price. Despite some recovered assets, it remains one of history's biggest corruption scandals. Luxury vacations, designer shoes, private jets. While taxpayers struggle, politicians live like royalty. But here's the real question. Should there be stricter rules on how public money is spent? Or will politicians always find loopholes? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.